I'm Robert Timmons, and you're watching Weekly Words. Thank you for checking out this week's episode of Weekly Words. I pray this last week has been extraordinary for you. It's so crazy to believe that we're in November. There's only 2 months left in 2018, so let's be sure that we go out with a bang, all right? But until then, let's get started with this week's episode. So my inspiration for this week actually came from my youth pastor when he was speaking a couple of weeks ago. He was saying how his son was losing his first baby teeth and how his son was freaking out and thinking, "Dad, what's wrong? What's going on?" So he had to explain to him the concept that a baby tooth is something that's never meant to be permanent, right? That it is a placeholder for something greater, the adult tooth, right? He had to let him know that in order for him to receive the better in his life, in this case the adult tooth, he had to make room for it by losing his baby tooth. And as he was sitting there sharing, he further went on to say that, you know, there's blessings and promises that God has in our lives that we have to simply make room for. And we have to open up our eyes to that possibility. So I want to expand upon that concept. So like my youth pastor said, there are promises and blessings that God has for each and every one of us, right? We have to simply make room for them to be put in our lives. So the question is, what baby tooth are you holding on to? And a baby tooth can be a multitude of things. It can be a mindset or a lifestyle, a habit. It can be a relationship. It can be a season. It can be anything in your life going on that you're just kind of doing for this season or for last season. And you have to make room for the bigger and better in your life. Now, all of these things might have been great for last season or great for today, but in order to hone in on the blessing and promise that God has for your life, you have to make room for the better, right? And this gets really difficult because think about the analogy of the baby tooth and the adult tooth. There's a point in time that I want to call the gap where the baby tooth has fallen out, but the adult tooth has not started growing in yet, or we can't see it growing in yet, and there's that gap. The point in time when the promise has not been fulfilled. Now, in terms of our teeth, we know that it's a fact that an adult tooth is coming, so we don't doubt it. We just wait and trust in the process. So in that same light, we have to do the same thing in our lives. Whenever we are making room for the promise and there's that wait time, that gap period, the time when we don't see the promise being fulfilled, we have to stay faithful knowing that it is to come, that it is just part of the process of the fulfillment. Right? So I'd like to suggest that the baby tooth is symbolic of your current location, mindset, relationship, situation, job, and that it's just a placeholder for something that's greater. Now, I'm not saying that you got to just drop whatever you're doing and break up with your significant other or quit your job or move cities or anything like that. No, I'm not suggesting that at all. But what I'm saying is if you're in a space where you're praying for God and believing in Him to provide for you or to help you, think in what ways that you need to change your life to make room for the blessing, right? Maybe you're in a place where you need to change your mindset, or you need to apply for a different job, or maybe you need to go to bed early, or you need to volunteer, serve, or lead, or go to church, or whatever it is. Maybe you're in a space where you need to make room, shift some things around so that you can make room for God to move. This makes me think back to Luke in Luke chapter 5, where Peter went out fishing and he didn't catch anything. The next day, Jesus comes back and he notices he didn't catch anything, so he said, let's go back out and fish. And Peter's like, I already tried, there's no use, but since you said so, sure. They go out and Jesus tells them to cast his net into the deep end, which is not what a fisherman typically does. They actually do it in the shallow. And again, Peter's like, Jesus, this isn't going to work. What's the point? But okay, sure, you said so. Let's go. So he does it, and he actually catches a whole bunch of fish, so much so where he has to call his friends over to get the surplus, right? In this moment, Peter he did all the work, right? He did it diligently and when he was supposed to, but there wasn't any results, right? And he made a decision to trust Jesus and to make room for him to move in his life, right? I believe we need to do the same things. There might be something that God is calling you to do that is a little bit out the norm, or it's trying again after you've already tried for days or weeks or months or something, but trying one more time. And that decision can be the way that you are making room for God to move in your life. The same way that he moved in Peter's life in regards to the fish in Luke chapter 5. So for us, what does it look like to cast our net back out for the fish, right? And for us, it can be so many different things. It can be applying for the job, giving the tithe, volunteering to serve. It can be leading. It can be saying yes. It can be going on a date. It can be opening. It's anything that's opening up your life to the potential for God to move in your life, right? Don't think of making room as letting go of all this stuff, right? It's opening up yourself to the possibility and potential for God to move, right? The same way whenever you have company over, you might shift your furniture around to make room for more chairs or for another table, right? You're not getting rid of things, but you're making room. You're shifting your priority so that you can reach what you're trying to reach, okay? So make room for God in your life so that he can bless you and fulfill the promises that he has for you. All right, so question time. Just like every other week, I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions. And again, I encourage you to think through them with your accountability partner and see in which ways you've grown so far this year. All right, so let's get started. Question 1. What baby tooth are you holding on to? What baby tooth are you holding on to? Question 2. How can you make room for what God has for you? How can you make room for what God has for you? And question 3, what priorities in your life need to shift? What priorities in your life need to shift? Thank you for checking out this week's episode of Weekly Words. I pray that you thoroughly enjoyed it and got something positive from it. If you have any suggestions for things for me to talk about in the future, feel free to email me at weeklywordsrt@gmail.com. Again, that's weeklywordsrt@gmail.com. All right, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you back here next time.